Welcome back to The Manual, podcast where we talk about the stuff most men's podcasts are too afraid to touch. Today's episode is going to be wild, raw, and real. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Manual. It is week 2 of the sex talk you never got. We're excited to dive in. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and it's time for From the Comment Section. We got a few hot ones today. Last time we talked about how we shouldn't be recording a podcast and posting on the internet.
That's right.
Bad hairdos, and I forget what the last one was, but self-help. That's what it was.
What was the self-help one?
About being addicted to self-help.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Spending all of his money on self-help routines.
Yeah, I relate to
that. Retreats, etc.
Yeah.
And going broke because of it, I think, was maybe the primary pain point. All right. From Kevin Comments. This guy's life is devoted to commenting on the internet. Yeah. Kevin Comments says, why is the name of your channel The Freedom Group? How about that for a layup?
Yeah.
Nick, why did we name our channel The Freedom Group?
Well, we had a whole list of names. I wish I would have thought of that before this. Of just like it was like 20 or 30 different names we had. But ultimately, yeah, because we didn't want it to be the sobriety group or the recovery group. But ultimately, freedom is the promise. And when a man gets free, look out, world. So, and ultimately we would say, the goal isn't totally freedom. The goal is to reign as a king. But freedom is the ticket to get there.
Yep. The channel, to answer Kevin Comments directly, is called The Freedom Group because that's the name of our brand.
Hilarious.
And it felt like a natural extension to also put that on our YouTube.
He was asking why the channel is, not why we are called The Freedom Group. That, I missed that part.
Yeah. And that's the answer. Is the channel is called The Freedom Group because we're called The Freedom Group. And you can learn more about that at thefreedomgroup.co.co.
Amazing.
Second one. How about this for another layup? Bradley Esterbrook 232 says, good stuff. Love you guys.
Love you too, Bradley.
How about that for a comment? That's maybe,
I don't know.
We've had a few hand clap comments or a few things like that. But it is always nice when people are nice on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't mind it one bit.
I'll thank good stuff, but I'll rarely comment good stuff. So I receive it.
Right. Absolutely. So nice work, Bradley. You are a G. Scattered Matter 3486 says, you shouldn't be educating toddlers on sex. That's disgusting. Last week, we talked about bringing sexuality into the conversation and starting young. Nick, you were talking about, I think, what's very wise, and I don't know how broad it is in culture in general to be able to start introducing your child to anatomical terms or talking about their body the way you would talk about their arms or their legs or their head by using the term that it helps them identify what it is versus pee-pee or woo-woo or any other random phrase.
We were hoo-hoo and ding-dongs.
Hoo-hoo,
that's what we were. Don't touch your
hoo-hoo and ding-dongs.
Yeah. And Pax, don't play with your ding-dong.
I don't know that you're talking about in the family you are raising, not the family you were
early
raised
on,
in.
because you got to call it something. But I think because for some reason we're like a little uncomfortable with it, as he was like, well, I don't know what I'm uncomfortable with it as an adult. And so we would just soften it down. So in my family as dad, we would call it early on until I heard the wisdom of it's important to name it accurately.
Yep. Yeah, so just to identify, there's a difference between talking to a toddler about the activity of sex, which is probably, I wouldn't say probably, is age inappropriate,
Yeah.
versus talking to your child about what they are aware of, which is what's attached to them, what they're
Hmm.
becoming aware of in their own body, and then the bodies of their siblings. And doing that in a way that makes it normal, makes it easy for them to identify and speak about it in a way that's appropriate is very helpful and very
Hmm.
important for a child. So again, there's a distinction there, and I think scattered matter either didn't listen to what was said,
Yeah.
or I think a lot of us have this natural aversion to actually doing something like that. Again, like you said, because we're uncomfortable with it, and so our children pick up on that lack of comfort around making the conversation about their sexual
Yeah.
body, and that parts of
Yeah.
our body are sexual in nature, and and even that isn't necessarily a disclosed fact for a toddler. Certainly, that they're aware that their penis or their vagina is no different than their left leg or their right leg or their arms or their head, right? And being able to make it normal in that context is very appropriate. All right, generative principle. Generative principle.
So
I
to clarify, that's the name of a guy's handle,
Yes, his handle is generative principle.
which I kind of like.
Yeah. To one of our conversations in response to a comment from last week about being addicted to self-help, uh, or life hacking, if you will. Generative Principle said, "Good stuff. I started doing occult," and he put in parentheses, esoteric Christianity, Hermetic, Kabbalah, alchemy, a couple years ago to experience some woo-woo things, only to realize it's just ancient systems for self-integration. How does the state of your consciousness and your fundamental beliefs generate action in material world in every aspect of your life, sexuality, money, relationships, etc.? After doing what was effectively just ancient spiritual psychology, I could start reverse engineering my behavior back to beliefs. For example, I had a hard time talking about sex. I felt embarrassed. Why? Because it is extreme connection in my family. There was no connection. I had learned connection is bad. Why? Because being seen was bad. Why? Because I was abused physically, and that made me hate myself. Self hate equaled the inability to connect with myself, which equaled the inability to connect with others. My sexuality was reduced to carnality. I had nothing but lust, which is misaligned desire. At least that's how I conceptualize it. Nick, thoughts or reactions to this comment?
Yeah, it's a lot of self awareness there. His, just reverse engineering, the actions back to the thoughts. Like thoughts create actions, and faith can drive behavior, and fear can drive behavior. And whether someone's Christian or not, God has created the world ordered in such a way that there's a way things work. There's a way thoughts work. There's a way that words have power. Um, and it's just really interesting. There's probably a lot of thoughts here, but just how the occult has kind of, or the new age world has kind of commandeered or taken a lot of, I think, actual principles of Christianity and how God has ordered the world and kind of twisted them a little bit, where I become the center of everything. I think, therefore, I am a little bit of Descartes stuff. And so you know, anyways, but I just want to highlight, especially his awareness of, he had a hard time talking about sex and he felt embarrassed. Why? Because sex is like the extreme form of connection. And in his family, there was no connection. He learned that it was bad. And why did he learn that it was bad? Because being seen was bad. Why was being seen was bad? Because he was abused. And that led to self hatred. And just that why question is really important. Why am I doing what I'm doing? well, let's engage the thoughts. Like his human behavior is fascinating. What people do is interesting. What people say is interesting. What people think is interesting. But why we do what we do, why we say what we say, why we think what we think, and engage in your story. So much of the work we do with guys is helping them engage their story, making sense of their story, and then growing in self compassion and kindness towards themselves, because I think we talked about it last week. Contempt and self hatred is a crippling, uh, yeah, device of the enemy that we start, that and then it just kind of cripples ourselves. So, generative principle, I'm just really encouraged by, really honestly, the journey you're on, the very honest journey he's on. What about you?
Yeah, I love it. The two things that come to mind for me really are in line with what you said, but maybe at a higher level, or I mean, this is a level of complexity, I think, that reveals the curiosity
Yeah,
and the pursuit of truth that he's journeying towards, which is really beautiful. And in our time in ministry context, Nick, professionally, and just in friend groups, my conviction is that uh, the exit of so many of my peers from the Christian faith was not to nothing. They didn't leave because they were sick of Christianity and didn't want anything anymore, to be ruled by anything. They went searching. And so many of my peers grew up in contexts where holiness was held up as the ultimate ideal, but what they experienced was what Jesus talks about in scripture, the whitewashed tomb
yeah,
experience of Christianity, right? Which is kind of the image of holiness, do all the right things from a religious standpoint, but looked like deep depravity or brokenness in the wholeness dimension of our life. And so, what I've seen so many of my peers or friends or dear friends do is to leave Christianity in search for wholeness. And they go to things like Eastern religions, yoga, magic mushrooms, having hallucinogenic trips, getting really into health and wellness, really attempting to perfect their routines, the way that they live their lives, thinking deeply about their relationships, trying to find synergy and connection relationships, because 50% of them grew up in families of divorce and didn't want to repeat that cycle, experienced brokenness, or if a marriage stayed together, real disconnection and disunity, that didn't feel well or whole to them. So they've gone searching for that answer to wholeness, which I think is clearly written here in his commentary. Uh, and ultimately, my personal conviction is that you can't have one without the other. That wholeness and holiness are fit together, and we can only find them rather through the divine life and relationship with the Creator, who created us for the expression and the experience of wholeness and holiness together. And I think because of the lack of holiness is how you get the whitewashed tomb version of holiness, where it's do all the right Christian things, be a good little Christian boy, don't sin, don't mess up, don't make mistakes. Uh, it, you know, but there is then also sort of the cajoling, like, uh, you know, uh, just an example, like, as Catholics, when we feast, we really feast, and when we fast, we cheat. Well, what is what is that? Like, that's not holiness, right? But it's also very much not wholeness. It's not serving our body, our spirit, and our brain's ability to put itself back together when we cheat in fasting, for example. And so, uh, yeah, I just think there is something far more global than this one particular example that's happening here,
yeah,
of a world searching to be able to, especially the Christian world, searching for wholeness again. That's connected to generations and history and the ebb and flow of humanity as sort of the pendulum swings back and forth. And I think In this swing, we're experiencing this great searching for wholeness. And then the second thing, and you kind of talked about this, is an experience I had in a brain and human behavior class I took in college. And you were a part of this journey with me, Nick, where we watched this video about these physicists talking about everything is energy and energetic principles, and the world is energy. And the documentary was put together by a new age cult. And many of the physicists came out and said that they, edited a bunch of stuff and took stuff we said out of context. And so they sort of edited down what is true about reality to fit their narrative of what they wanted the conclusion to be. Now, many of the facts that they spoke about in this documentary were true, right? But the conclusion was wrong. And it messed me, watching this documentary messed me up. It really, I went and talked to a priest about it. You and I talked about it. Like I was deeply perturbed by this because of the connection between the facts. Well, if this is true, then what is true? And I remember years later, it was probably in the later several years, Dr. Bob came out. Which book was it? Be
Transformed? Yeah, in his chapter on God's powerful blessings. And blessings is something that Sam Jolman talked about in his book. It's not just like a simple prayer, but the power of the word to bless and to be fruitful and actually change reality.
Yeah. So one of the things that they talked about in this documentary, as well as he talks about in the book, is studies that have been done of people speaking to physical things, droplets of water, or like a bowl of white rice, and doing nothing to affect change in it, but speak to it. And or to put word labels on it. So to print out a word label and put it on a bottle of water, or to put it on a bowl of rice.
Yeah.
And the things that they put hateful words on or bad words on deteriorated, or under a microscope, the crystalline structure of the water droplet was deformed and chaotic and disorganized. And then the ones that they spoke words of love to, or affirmation to, if you will, or labeled as such, stayed, in the case of the rice, stayed pure white and didn't rot and didn't turn black. And in the water, it was perfect crystalline structure. And the conclusion that Dr. Bob Schutz drew from this in his book is that God was right when he told us in scripture, and in no better place than in the book of James, that has a whole chapter devoted to the power of words, the power of our tongues, that words are powerful, that they bless and they curse. And that isn't just a metaphorical or a spiritual reality as much as it is a holistic reality of life, in body, mind, and spirit, that what we speak blessing on is blessed physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And what we curse is cursed physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So those are the two things that come to mind for me when I read this.
We did that here in Kansas City years ago. We had a cup of two mason jars of white rice. We had people bless one of them and curse the other. And after a month, the cursed rice was moldy and the white rice was white. Coincidence? I would propose not. There's also a pretty cool a video that IKEA put out about bullying plants. And it just is how it works. If you speak bad words to the plant, this is just reality. And it's so freaking cool that the plant started to wither. Look it up, guys. It's so cool. And thoughts are powerful. Words are powerful. And there's your intro to today. So, y'all, Bradley, Kevin comments, and generative principle, thanks for boosting the algorithm. Y'all like and subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get this mission out to as many people as possible. So today we want to talk about chapter 1. Last week we talked about the introduction to Sam Jolman's book, The Sex Talk You Never Got. Today we're talking about chapter 1, You Are a Lover. I want to read a quote from James Smith that Sam drops at the beginning of the chapter. He says, human beings are fundamentally erotic creatures. To be human is to be a lover and to love something ultimate. So, what I love about chapter one is what Sam does is he doesn't start with rules or damage or repair. He starts with your identity. Parts of in John Eldridge and his his archetypes of the masculine journey, starting with the beloved son, from the cowboy to the warrior. Then you get to the lover, or lover and then king, right? So the lover stage, and there's a particular point in your life when you really are living in that, but we're always called to, we were created to love and to be, engaged in awe and beauty. Not someone who sometimes feels desire, not someone who struggles with romance, but a person whose very nature is oriented towards love, beauty, and connection. That's who we are. And the longing that we feel, it's not, as he says, it's not a character flaw, but it's the most human thing about us, about you. He talks about the hookup culture, this cultural phenomena that we want to hit on today. And he doesn't condemn it, but he really diagnoses it. He gets curious about what's going on there, arguing that even the most disconnected sexual behavior is a distorted expression of a legitimate and deep longing for awe, wonder, and transcendence. And I think we've mentioned in the past, Dr. Bob mentioned him again. He says, underneath every desire, no matter how disordered or off base, is a good and holy desire, an unmet need, and uh, a um, a core wound, legitimate, a good desire, unmet need, and a core wound. So he draws on the romantic tradition and the theology of desire, arguing that the ache underneath romance and sexuality is ultimately an ache for God, and he distinguishes between sex isn't a need, but desire and connection is. So it sets the tone for the rest of the book that we're going to be going through over the next many weeks. Joe, love just kick it to you. What are some things? What stood out to you from this chapter?
Yeah, there's a lot of things because it's a pretty high level chapter, right? Talking about romance, awe, beauty. What's the goal? What's the ideal of sexual integrity or integration? Um, which he references often are oftentimes foreign or lost concepts or ideals for the masculine heart that we've lost or been not unformed. Again, referencing back to the introduction chapter, in what the goal is here, how to have it, how to steward it, how to develop it. And so one of the things that stood out most to me, thinking about specifically, like body count, having a high body count, seeing that as a sign of like a the ideal man, or a casual view of pornography as simple pleasure, that most men today experience sex in far too small of a lens. And what he's inviting us to in the discussion of romance and beauty is to have an expansive view of beauty and awe and wonder. And we'll talk about it in a little while, but one of his main critiques of Christian purity culture is that it holds up purity as the ideal, like what God designed sexuality to orient us towards is being pure, not screwing up, right? Don't do it. And that's it failed. I mean, it was a reaction to the sexual revolution, and it failed in correctly inviting people to the Christian ideal of what sexuality is meant to draw us into in the story of creation, which is this expansive, expanded view of reality. And it made me think, at one point I wrote down in the margin of the book that porn dulls wow,
Mm.
right? That it turns, and I think this is the case for all unformed sexuality, is that it removes my capacity to see the world in color. And that's as much on a neurological level as it is on a spiritual or mental level, if you will, that it trains my brain to have a very narrow view of where I get pleasure. You know, Andrew Huberman's quote about addiction is anything that narrows the array of things that give me pleasure.
Yeah.
The healthy brain is able to receive pleasure from many things, and in many cases, small, ordinary, simple things of life that reward me by participating in them. And that through this malformed use of my body or my desire, I get locked in to only this gives me pleasure, which then makes all of these other things unpleasurable
What's the name for
unintentionally.
that?
What's the name for what?
For what where you ultimately you're so stimulated that eventually you lose your ability to experience
I
pleasure.
mean, anhedonia is
And that's it.
anhedonia is the state of sort of the removal of dopamine,
Okay.
the brain's reward system for
Okay.
pleasure. Um, yeah, being in a state of anhedonia, whereas I get no reward from anything.
Right.
Um, and I think many people don't realize how much their brain has been affected because of the lack
Mhm.
of formation in their sexuality, especially if they're engaged in some particular or persistent use, disordered use of their body, their brain in sexual activity, whether it be in porn or masturbation or hookups, etc., that all of this stuff is graying out as a result of only seeing this in color. But then also the color of this gets distorted, right? And then fails to meet the expectation and in the hope that I place in it to give me what of life is meant to give me. And so then I also lose out in my ability to be able to experience the beauty and the awe and the wonder of it as the gift that it's meant, because I put all sort of my eggs in that basket of I need reward. I need ultimate reward from this activity.
Mhm.
And it's not meant or designed to be able to give that to me in totality.
Yeah. And there's such a I mean the whole we're created for connection, and connection is risky. Connection requires effort. Connection requires me getting out of myself and giving of myself. And I mean just the porn piece is such a an easily accessible cotton candy approach to trying to get what I want, and it hyper and maybe you can speak into this, Joe, but I mean there's dopamine and serotonin, right? There's the dopamine that gets released, but also what are I don't know if this is a rabbit trail, but what are uh, d- the activities that se- release serotonin into the brain? Are you aware what? Because it has to do. It's like this having a healthy amount of serotonin softens the landing when you're after a dopamine spike. It comes down on like a soft pill. So you want to have high levels of serotonin so that when the quote pain after the pleasure comes, it's more of a soft fall. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, the simple answer, I mean, versus getting into sort of a list of those things, the simple answer is, again, going back to Dr. Andrew Huberman, where it's beware of any reward that doesn't require effort or sacrifice. Effort or sacrifice is the
Yeah.
category of serotonin, right?
Okay. That's
It's
good.
it's it's the edge to the reward. And as a result, it limits the height of the reward, which is also part of what's at play here, right? If I do something that's intensely pleasurable, think drugs,
Hmm.
uh, I also then am going to experience the deep trough of the removal of that reward and the both the lack of unpleasurable or the lack of pleasure neurochemicals, but also the discomfort neurochemicals that are going to flood my brain to try to get me back to homeostasis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the simple answer to the question is effort and sacrifice is super important in the reward. And again, talking about the realm of romance and beauty, that there's a certain lack that again in the formation of, what is sexual arousal meant to do? Well, it's meant to get me out of freaking bed and go out there and win the beauty, right?
Yeah.
Go on the date, develop the romance, exercise, and then thinking about marriage, to not stop that, right? To not let the sex life become deadened or absent because I'm not participating in the work and the effort and sacrifices of continuing to cultivate that relationship. And it requires work. It requires effort, but ultimately that effort and work is as good for me as the reward of the sexual connection is for me in the ideal. One of the
Yeah.
other things that I wanted to point out that he gets to when he's talking about beauty is he says on page 4 that beauty is about presence, not simply appearance.
Hmm.
And I think about, I work on a college campus. I think about the more that we become unformed in this, the more that people start to look like mere copies of each other. That as the
Mm.
internet, social media is holding up the ideal of the appearance of beauty, women bleach blonde their hair, they get the butt, they wear the clothes, they exercise the right way, and they appear beautiful, but they also lose the presence of beauty, the personality, the uniqueness, the thing that elicits, you know, I, at least half of the sort of thing that draws. And I think that's certainly the case for men as well, that we just try to like mirror or imitate what masculine looks like, and then we lose the personality of ourselves, the uniqueness of ourselves. And and again, in a similar way, it kind of dulls those extra dimensions of who we are and trains us to sort of like just look this way, perform this way, act this way, all talk the same way. And we lose the character of the presence of beauty, the personality that draws us into the adventure. And that's a word he uses over and over and over again in this first chapter is adventure, beauty, awe, wonder. All is meant to be able to connect us with the adventure
Yeah.
of life.
Yeah.
And he I think rightly proposes that adventure when it comes to sexuality has been utterly lost in broader
Totally.
culture and in Christianity, and we need to find it again if we're going to experience sexual integration.
It's so good. It reminds me, we're last night in our couples group, we went through a few key principles in these two different books called For Women Only and For Men Only. And ultimately, there's some core principles that is helpful for women to know about men. And they're discovered through thousands of interviews. And so it's a statistical study. So they're not like objectively true for every person. So, for example, obviously, more men have a higher sex drive than women. There are outliers where in marriages, sometimes a woman does have a higher sex drive than men. But these principles are generally true. There's like the love and respect principle. But one I want to highlight for us today that we talked about last night, and it's here it is. For him, sex is primarily emotional, not physical. And if she breaks it open, it says that men are assumed to be purely physically driven around sex. But her research shows something more layered. When a wife initiates or responds with genuine desire, it doesn't just meet a physical need, it tells him he's wanted, valued, and enough. And when sex disappears from a marriage, men don't just feel frustrated, they feel rejected at some level that bleeds into how they show up everywhere else at work, as a father, as a husband. And the physical and emotional are far more connected for men than most women, or I would even say men, realize that at our core, we're a lover. And that's not just about physical sex. That's about so much more to life and adventure and beauty. And it's deep heart level connection that we all deeply long for. I mean, Proverbs says, guard your heart, for from it flows the wellspring of life. And I love what you highlighted. Beauty is about presence, not just appearance. It's being taken captive by a song, by a work of art, by the a beautiful sunrise, and to be captured by my whole body, by my whole person in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of he also spends a lot of time talking about the terms sensitivity and sensuality, which I think are both really important
Hmm.
lost ideals. That sensitivity and sensuality are supposed to be cultivated parts of us, and they get dulled when we're developing sexuality in an unformed way. That, again, jumping to our conversation on hookup culture, one of the core principles of hookup culture from research is don't feel it.
Right.
That the goal of hookup culture is emotionless sex, and that alcohol is a required element of hookup culture's existence, because we have to dull our sensitivity and sensuality in order to express sexuality in outside of them. But we're made with sensitivity and sensuality, and I really appreciate you calling out for a man the risk and the reward of initiating or receiving the gift of his bride, his lover.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I've experienced that, and I notice in myself the sensitivity to it in my romantic relationship of do I ask for this? Do I initiate? How will she respond? Is she in the mood? What will happen if I do? And cultivating that uh, and understanding that about your partner is deeply important. And then again, like you said, it's not just cultivating sensitivity and sensuality in the sexual dimension in order to get sex. It's about cultivating that in one another in all of life. I mean, Arthur Brooks talks about this. He has this popular social media excerpt about the 5 ways to save your marriage, and number one is have more fun together. you
Yeah,
know,
that's good.
right? And something that Jolman talks a lot about is in adventure, in
And
play,
play. Yeah.
like that. There we need to cultivate lives that have and embody this kind of
Totally.
play that is a holistic that I can experience play in a variety of things. And a healthy sexuality is a playful sexuality, right? That it's
Right.
not mere mechanics or
Right.
what you see so often in pornography, which is like this heated intensity about in usury and the heat of the passion of it. That there's this kind of playfulness, this kind of lightness to it
Yeah.
that is so often lost in the imitation of a divorced sexuality from the whole person. Um, and one of the things, along with the dullness that he calls out, that I also wrote down in the margins, is repressed sensitivity. Right, that an unformed sexuality requires us to begin to repress sensitivity. That an objective of becoming an adult person is to feel less, right? And I think fundamentally, in order to be hurt or affected by less,
Totally.
when really he breaks out, and the opposite is true. That the invitation is to feel more and to feel more from all of life, to be moved by more in life. And again, he talks about, I was just talking with a client this morning about experiencing sexual arousal and then running to pornography in order to alleviate that sexual arousal. Um, and learning to be able to experience the goal is not to repress sexual arousal. The goal is to learn how to redirect it, to be able to behold all of beauty, to be able to have awe and wonder about the gift of created beauty around us, and our capacity to be able to do that, to train our brains and our bodies to be able to see beauty and respond to it in a healthy way becomes the way, versus the never behold it,
Right.
put it away, never see it. And again, there's a conversation to be had about uh uh clothing and the way that we dress, and immodesty and modesty, sure, in this category. But again, I think a lot of that gets into this realm of hide it, put it away, never let anyone see it. Um, and it's like, in some ways, God putting thick clouds over every mountain. And this is too much for you. You can't take this in. That it's meant to be able to behold another, is meant to elicit something that calls out the adventure, the beauty, the longing, the desire
Yeah.
in all of us. And there is certainly danger in it, but there's also invitation, right? And I think as a Christian culture, we've over related to the danger to the point that we behold every instance of sexual arousal as threat
That's really good.
versus invitation,
Yeah.
right? And so what I'm trying to acknowledge is a both and conversation, not an either or. Uh, but we need to correct, maybe, from
Hmm.
danger to invitation. That there's an invitation here. And again, the invitation isn't just purely to get the sex desire met, but to learn how to use the desire for sexual expression to be
Hmm.
able to cultivate a life where I experience awe and wonder as a
Hmm.
daily rhythm, rather than as
Yeah.
something that I drive 13 hours to get to Colorado to have
Yeah.
once a year. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It's so good, man. There's so much you're saying, but what we're hitting on here is I'm reminded of JP2, John Paul II. He said that the problem with pornography isn't that it shows too much, is that it doesn't show enough. It shows too little. And that can be a cliche, but we're hitting on all of it here. Like the whole depth of the invitation to experience fully life as a sexual being, as a lover, is a body, heart, mind connection, spirit connection, soul level connection. And yeah, I just to read an excerpt from the book about the the hookup culture, where you're saying don't feel it is like the core principle, and that's why alcohol is required, so we completely dissociate our hearts from our bodies, our heads from our bodies. He says, saying that we can have sex without emotion, and this is on page 25. Saying that we can have sex without emotions is like saying we can have sex without bodies. But if emotions and feelings were allowed, then hookup culture would collapse on itself. Hookups wouldn't work anymore. They would be too moving and invoke too much care and mutual connection. And that would force people to admit sexuality's power over us. And very similarly, porn, it's very much, even though there's a fantasy going on, there's no heart level. We just become completely separated from our hearts. Um, and this isn't to condemn, this is to encourage us to get curious about actually what is my heart's longing. Because when we repress and when we numb, we can't locally anesthetize emotions. If we try to numb the pain, and we talk about this all the time, porn masturbation is not about the pursuit of pleasure as it is so much more about the avoidance of pain. And when we don't pause and get curious and really explore and become aware without judgment, what's going on, what is in my heart, I sever myself from my heart. I numb the pain, but I also numb the joy and the adventure of life. And life becomes black and white, one dimensional. And I just love so much in this book. In this chapter in particular, like you said, it's a high level overview, but it's the invitation to tap back into the lover heart, to explore beauty, explore wonder, explore feeling. And yes, that's feeling the pain and the suffering and the joy that comes living in God's good creation in
Yeah.
our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were sharing that, Nick, I'm reminded of one of my best friends from growing up, is a very sensitive person. very creative, very artistic, a man with wild ideas and an adventure. Like, he couldn't help himself from finding adventure
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
And I remember a conversation with him as he wrestled with his sexuality as an adult,
Mhm.
talking about struggling to even get sexually aroused in hookups and starting to wonder what was wrong with him and am I attracted to women
Right.
and what's going on here, really solely related to the sexual domain. And I remember at that time thinking, of course you can't get aroused in meaningless sex with strangers.
Right.
Like, I know you.
You're
You
too
you
heart.
you
You're all
you
heart.
yeah, you are
Yeah.
too sensitive to do
That's
that.
good.
Even
That's good.
alcohol can't numb the sensitivity that you have for
Wow.
meaningful connection.
Wow.
So it made it just I remember being struck, like, to me, it felt like such a logical fact. Like, of course you can't get get that because that's not what you want.
Yeah.
Like, you are so sensitive and connected to that part of you that no amount of alcohol or numbing can get you to be able to participate in the activity apart from the searching for the emotional connectedness of it. And,
Yeah.
just thinking about that now
Yeah.
really, I mean, it breaks my heart for him because of what he's still searching for in life, but it also just reinforces for me how true this is. One that many of us have the capacity to be able to do that, to be able to divorce ourselves, right? Referencing back to the first chapter. And again, I think the connection here, which helps materialize. I remember asking you in our last session, like, what does that really mean for a man to be disconnected from his heart and for a woman to be disconnected from her body? That hookup culture and alcohol's role in it helps make that disconnection
Yep.
happen.
Yep.
That I'm not looking for feedback from her of approval. I'm just acting and doing it regardless of whether or not she approves of it, right? And uh, the woman's capacity to be able to do it and to not feel the risk of it
Yeah.
and what it means to open herself up physically to that activity as a result of the inebriation. But just the invitation to be able to live more like that, to be able to live out of that place of adventure and ideation and creativity and I mean again, I mean you thinking about like sexuality and its design, it's designed to be creative, it's designed to be unitive, it's designed to draw out in some ways all of who we are. And I think an invitation to land, for today is how far off are you from living in that reality? Would you say that that's part of your life? Is this a foreign concept in reality as you've listened to this discussion? Uh, does it feel like foreign words or words on a screen, or is it calling to you? Is there a
Yeah.
part of you that doesn't have it but desires to learn how to have it? Or would you say that you can point to areas of your life like, that's what that is. That in me is the thing that I'm experiencing in this dimension of my life,
Mhm.
and an invitation to lean more into it.
That's so good. That's so good. And I'm sure there's moments in your life where there's been a grace to just drop into your heart, whether somebody shares a powerful story or you hear a song or you see a sunrise. And so, encourage me just to reflect, y'all. What's a moment in your life when desire, beauty, longing genuinely just stopped you and dropped you into your heart? What did it feel like in that moment? And that's the journey. That's the goal, is to live out of our hearts where the abundance and the wellspring of life flows from. So excited next week, y'all, for you to join us. We're going to be talking that what God wants, and He doesn't just want your purity. Most of all, He wants your awe. That's going to be the conversation and the proposal on the table. Grateful to be journeying with you guys. Looking forward to more of the comments. Drop them in there. As savage as you want to be, bring it on. Like, subscribe. Check us out at thefreedomgroup.co. We've got 2 more groups launching this month. We got a wait list for a priest group. Priest, if there's any priests out there listening, we've got 4 guys on a wait list to join our next priest group. And we got a lot of exciting things happening in Q2 leading into Q3 with what God's building in the Freedom Group as we look to disrupt the porn industry by liberating its user base and getting men back in the arena to change this world. We'll see you guys next week.